Good morning, dear participants and our learned resource person. You are most welcome to our international webinar on National Education Policy 2020. We will share one more video before it becomes 10 o'clock. And we are very privileged that our learned resource person from Delhi and Bangladesh already joined with us. Welcome, Kashopi ma'am. Welcome, sir, Dr. Jabbari Dalkhani. Okay, dear participants, we have in our college Ek Bharat Shrestha Bharat Club, and for raising awareness on COVID-19, the club has prepared one video. Hope you will enjoy the video. Thank you very much.
নমস্কার। কোভিড-19 শতাব্দীর বড় বিপর্যয়, বড় অভিশাপ, এক দুর্বিষহ অতিমারি। বিপন্ন দেশ, বিপন্ন বিশ্ব, বিপন্ন সমাজের প্রতিটি স্তর। এই দুর্যোগে, এই অবস্থার পরিপ্রেক্ষিতে রবীন্দ্রনাথ ঠাকুর মহাবিদ্যালয়ের ছাত্রছাত্রীদের নিবেদন, ভয় নয়। সন্ধ্যা আসিছে মন্দ মন্থরে, ইঙ্গিত গেছে ইঙ্গিতে থামিয়া। যদিও সঙ্গী নাহি অনন্ত অম্বরে, যদিও ক্লান্তি আসিছে অঙ্গে নামিয়া। মহাশঙ্কা জপিছে মৌন মন্তরে, কি দিগন্ত অবগুণ্ঠনে ঢাকা। তবু বিহঙ্গ, ওরে বিহঙ্গ মোর, এখনই অন্ধ, বন্ধ করুণা পাখা। বিপদে মোরে রক্ষা করো, নহে মোর প্রার্থনা করি ভয়। দুঃখ তাপে ব্যথিত চিতে, নাই বা দিলে সান্ত্বনা। দুঃখ যেন করিতে পারি জয়। তুমি একা ভাত খাবে, কেউ খাবে না। নিরাপদে কেউ শোবে না। আল্লাহ যিশুর চোখও আজ বড় ছলো ছলো। এত বড় দুর্যোগে তুমি ভালো আছো বলো? তুমি ভালো নেই। কেউ ভালো নেই বলে তুমি হাত বাড়ালেই দুর্যোগ যাবে চলে। তোমারই অপেক্ষায় অসহায় তুমি জেগে উঠলেই কালো মেঘে কেটে যায়। সামান্য অর্থ, একটু এগিয়ে এসো। দেশ লোক, তুমিও তো চাও বলো এদেশের ভালো হোক। কেউ একা পারবে না এ ধাক্কা সইতে। 10 জন এক হলে অভাবের উঠোনেতে বেঁচে থাকা কিছু মুখ প্রত্যাশায়। মুখ কি শুনছ চুপ করে, নামবে না ময়দানে? তোমারও তো বড় মন, কথা তারারা জানে। একটু তাকিয়ে দেখো, সবাই তো এগিয়েছে। আর্তের কাছে এসে সবাই যে দাঁড়িয়েছে। তোমার ওপর আজ আমাদের বিপজ্জনক পরিস্থিতিতে মনে রাখবেন, প্রথমত থাকুন, সুস্থ রাখুন পরিবার, পরিজন, সমাজকে। সরকারি নিয়ম নীতি মেনে চলুন, সামাজিক দূরত্ব বজায় রেখে চলুন, যতটা সম্ভব সুরক্ষিত থাকুন। ইমিউনিটিযুক্ত খাবার খান, নিজেকে পরিচ্ছন্ন রাখুন, শুষ্ক কাশি কিংবা জ্বর অথবা শ্বাসকষ্টজনিত অস্বস্তিতে ডাক্তার দেখান। মনে রাখবেন, আপনার সুস্থতা আপনার ও আপনার পরিবারের কাছে অত্যন্ত জরুরি। নিজে সুস্থ থাকুন, অন্যকে সুস্থ রাখুন, স্বার্থের সহায়তায় এগিয়ে আসুন। আমাদের দেখা হোক, আমাদের দেখা হোক, আমাদের দেখা হোক কান্নার ওপারে, আমাদের দেখা হোক সুখের শহরে, আমাদের দেখা হোক বিজ্ঞান জিতলে, আমাদের দেখা হোক মৃত্যু হেরে গেলে, আমাদের দেখা হোক এর মতো করে, দেখা হোক সুস্থ শহরে। ঘরে থাকুন, সুস্থ থাকুন, নিজেকে সুরক্ষিত রাখুন, সুরক্ষিত রাখুন পরিবার, পরিজন, সমাজকে। নমস্কার, শুভকামনা।
Good morning, everyone. I, Shri Uttam Mitra, the coordinator of Internal Quality Assurance Cell of Rabindranath Thakur Mahavidyalaya, warmly welcome each one of you to our international webinar on National Education Policy 2020 Aspects and Preparations. You all know that Rabindranath Thakur Mahavidyalaya is a new government degree college situated at Bishalgarh, Tripura, Sipahijola district, and it was established in the year 2012 with an aim to fulfill the aspirations of the rural youths for higher education. And the Internal Quality Assurance Cell was established in the year 2018, and in the following year 2019 we are actually we are accredited with B grade by NAC. Since then, since its establishment, Internal Quality Assurance Cell has been undertaking a number of initiatives for the overall development of the college and to impart quality education to the rural youths of this region. And this webinar is also one such initiative. And we are also honored that this year our college has bagged the Best College Award 2020 among all the general degree colleges in Tripura. So we want to share the glad tidings with all of you. Now this webinar, as you know, that National Education Policy 2020, it's the new education policy implemented, is going to be implemented in our country in the 21st century. And you know that this is going to replace the 34-year-old the education policy, which was approved in 1986. And we know that this policy, drafting of this policy was initiated way back in 2015, and then the first committee under the chairmanship of Dr. T.S.R. Subramanian, they submitted their report in 2017. But then once again, the committee was reformed under the chairmanship of Dr. K. Kasturi Rangan, the former chief of ISRO. And finally, we got our national education policy, July 29, when cabinet approved it. Now we have many learned resource persons from our country and abroad to discuss the various aspects of NEP 2020. how it's really going to transform the education scenario of our country, and making our nation the dream that is envisioned by our Prime Minister, Ek Bharat, Shrestha Bharat, or making India, a knowledge power. So we are going to know about it, because we believe that all the stakeholders of this policy, the parents, the teachers, the students, everyone has certain responsibilities to be fulfilled, certain duties to be performed, because this is our policy. We have to take ownership of this policy. So feel free to ask any questions. The chat box is there. You can ask your questions in the chat box, and our learned resource persons are surely going to respond to this to your questions. With this note, I welcome our beloved principal, Dr. Chitrapal, to address and welcome all the resource persons and participants to this webinar. Thank you very much. Over to you, Principal Ma'am.
Hello, Uttam. Hello, everybody. Good morning, everybody. Uttam?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, very much. Clear.
Okay. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Respected.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, Kashyopi ma'am. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, ma'am.
Respected Honorable Director, Department of Higher Education, Government of Tripura. Respected guest speaker, Dr. Jabbor Idil Khani, former professor, BIT, Bangladesh. Respected Kashyopi Vasti, assistant professor, NIPA. Respected Subhash Sarkar, assistant professor, Tripura University. Respected Mr. Anurag Kundu, chairman, DCPCR, Delhi. Respected school teachers, respected other distinguished participants, my dear colleagues and students, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Rabindranath Thakur Mahavidyalaya, Vishalgarh, Sipahijala, Tripura, I welcome everybody present at the inaugural session of the international webinar organized by IQSC RTM Vishalgarh. Presently, the whole world is at a critical time, reeling under the pandemic, which, in other words, is a blessing in disguise, rendering an opportunity to organize a number of webinars at the college. It is worth mentioning to note that as many as 12 regional and national, 2 international webinars, 1 6-day faculty development program, 1 faculty workshop on new education policy had already been organized by the college during the pandemic period. Besides holding online classes, examinations, collection of feedback from students and teachers, and organization of various cultural programs and competitions. It's my pleasure to announce that the Department of Botany is going to organize another 2-day international webinar on 26th and 27th September 2020. Artiminians do everything with great joy and orgy enthusiasm. mere some mellifluous words as a gesture of thanks and acclamation do not suffice the efforts of the coordinator, Professor Uttam Mitra, and other members of IQAC to organize such a wonderful webinar, and thus I convey my hearty thanks and a deep respect to every participant for sparing their valuable time and efforts. I sincerely welcome all dignitaries for according some valuable time from their busy and hectic schedule and making the webinar a fruitful one. At the very outset, I warmly welcome respected Sir Mr. Shaju Bahid A, Honorable Director, Department of Higher Education, Government of Tripura, for his kind presence at the webinar. On behalf of RTM Vishalgarh, I offer my gratitude to him for his cordial cooperation, guiding suggestions, and unflinching support to the development of the college. With immense pleasure, I would like to announce that our young college, only at the age of 8 years, is awarded with Best College Award 2020 by the government of Tripura. It's a boundless joy and inspiration to all of us for such much a journey. Thank you, everybody. I am also thankfully to Madam Kashyapi Vasti for agreeing to join with us and delivering her lecture. Thank you, Madam. Thank you very much. I welcome warmly Professor Jabbar Idil Khani for his kind presence at the webinar. Sir, আপনাকে রবীন্দ্রনাথ ঠাকুর মহাবিদ্যালয়ের পক্ষ থেকে আমরা শ্রদ্ধা জানাই, নমস্কার জানাই। Basically, we belong to same culture, same language, and the history of two countries is wrapped each with other. But the partition has made separate us. তবুও আপনি বাংলাদেশ থেকে আমাদের কাছে এসেছেন, আমাদের সাথে যোগদান করেছেন। আমরা এক ভাষায়, এক সংস্কৃতিতে আপনাকে আমাদের কলেজ থেকে সম্মান, শ্রদ্ধা এবং নমস্কার জ্ঞাপন করছি। I am very happy to see Mr. Anurag Kundu because we met earlier when he suddenly visited the college and joined a cordial interactive session on the recent educational changes, especially in Delhi. Thank you very much, sir, for joining with us, and we are waiting for your lecture. I am also thankful to Dr. Subhash Sarkar, Assistant Professor, Tripura University, for accepting our invitation and agreeing to deliver a lecture before audience present at the webinar. I am very glad, Subhash sir, to meet you. I am specially welcome respected school teachers, officers of education department, and other distinguished persons for attending the webinar from different parts of Tripura and outside of Tripura. We extend our loving hand to the friends of school education. I think It's a good initiative of IQSC. Basically, we are belong to teacher community as a whole. We are working from a same platform with different designations. So I think there is no problem to work jointly. I hope that today's seminar shall enrich ourselves by the features of NEP, the motto of NEP, the ways of respect to the culture and heritage of India, and the theories of reconstructing the bridge between Vedic knowledge and modern science and technology. Again, I thanks everybody. I wish the seminar will be a grand success. Namaste, namaskar, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, madam, for such an inspiring welcome lecture. You really set the tone, and we are confident that under your dynamic leadership, we are going to achieve one after another milestone. Thank you very much. Now I welcome our beloved, our very dear Shopi ma'am. She is actually, I should say, she's the leader of the leaders because, you know, she is producing leaders. Her favorite, you know, saying is that leaders make leaders. So she is in true sense a very, very dynamic leader. And under her actually leadership, I had the privilege to attend a 14-day leadership program. She came to Tripura along with Anthony sir, and we about 50 school heads, we attended her you know, this 14-day long you know, training program, and she really, you know, transformed everyone, and not only in our state. I think, you know, wherever she goes, she's, you know, working in NUPA under this, especially her focus is the school leadership program, and she is really transforming the lives, you know, or, you know, producing leaders everywhere throughout the country. And it is such a privilege. Actually, I postponed our webinar, even though we had direction that by 18th we have to complete this, you know, webinar. But because I wanted to have her, so I was, you know, waiting when madam is going to give her time. And thank you, madam. Finally, you made it, and you are connected to us. And let me read a little bit about her. She is an assistant professor.
Uttam sir.
Yes, ma'am. No, just a little bit so that everybody knows. She is an assistant professor with the Department of School and Non-Formal Education at NUPA. Her current focus has been school leadership development and has been actively engaged in the development of curriculum and handbook of school leadership development and teaching at the National Center for School Leadership. And prior to that, she served as a lecturer at the Department of Education, CASE, the MS, University of Baroda, Gujarat. So, madam, actually, whatever we say, it will be less for you. You are such a dynamic leader, and we are really privileged to have you on this webinar. Now, over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Uttam sir, you will have to allow me to share screen. Then I'll be able to share. I think you've locked it for participants.
Yes, ma'am, it is open for you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. I've not made it full screen as of now. We'll have some talk and then I'll come back to full screen. Thank you so much, Uttam sir, for being kind. In fact, very kind to me. And for all the introduction that you gave, I am humbled with it. Honorable Director, sir, Higher Education, Tripura, my co-panelists, respected Principal, ma'am, all teachers and future teachers, and of course, Uttam sir. Uh, I was actually delaying, um, as Uttam sir rightly said, I have conjunctivitis, and I couldn't focus. I couldn't see the screen. So I'm wearing these glares. Excuse me for it. This is not for being little more smarter. It's just that I cannot directly see the screen. Eyes are watering continuously. So I thought that if I could really excuse myself, but Uttam sir didn't allow me that. So I'm here with you. And I hope I am able to uh, give my 100%, and it helps us in our engagement. Although I've focused my presentation precisely on one area of school education, which is the point number 7, or you can say chapter 7 in that sense, which is about efficient resourcing and effective governance through school complexes. As Uttam sir said, my core area of work is school leadership, governance, administration, and that being the core area of NEPA as well. We no more call it NUPA, it's NEPA, National Institute of Educational Planning and Administration. So we've come back to our original title again. But I'll touch upon all the different aspects of school education, because we have a lot of teachers and we have future teachers connected on in this webinar. So I'll touch upon them, but dealing in detail with all of these areas would require an entire webinar in itself, because it's huge, huge. So some of the key, I would say, highlights when it comes to the area of school education is about, and some very positive points, I would say, is about the inclusion of early childhood care education. Um, and the 3 to 6 years age group, which was not included in RTE, if I would say, have now been given a greater emphasis, and the policy emphasizes on the inclusion of early childhood care education, and therefore proposes a curricular and pedagogical restructuring of education. The emphasis I'm making on curricular and pedagogical restructuring means physically we are not changing things in, it is the curricular change that we are bringing, it's the pedagogical change that we are bringing. So when we say, or when the policy for that matter, if the policy puts up 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4, doesn't mean that the school is now going to have some compartments. Earlier it had 10 plus 2 plus 3 as a compartment, and now 5 plus 3 plus 4. It simply means that the first 5 years are the preparatory years, as they are called in the policy, which really helps the child to make themselves learning ready in the sense, and the emphasis is not as much on learning new concepts as on learning habits, as on finer motor movements, as on the child's free, it's on creativity, it's on inquiry, which really helps the child, which really gives a brain exercise. So if we look at the first paragraph of the point number 1 on early childhood care and education, it talks that this period, the 3 to 6 years age group, and the formal years of the child's, of the person's life, where the synaptic changes are very fast, and where this development really takes place. So the multiplicity of learning experiences that you provide to the child would really decide how one grows in terms of one's intellectual development, in terms of one's affectionate domain, development of one's affective domain, and the psychomotor domain. So giving multiple learning opportunities to the child. Here we'll come back, when we go for discussion, we'll come back on the implications that this would have on teacher education, because as of now we have very few teacher education colleges and universities that give a degree in or prepares teachers for early childhood care, or bachelors in elementary education, as I would say. In Delhi we have it, but we don't have it in any other part of the country. There are some colleges which are giving diploma degrees or bachelors in elementary education, but that's very, very limited. So when we have to have it at the, we are having this as a policy measure, we will have to have it in every state, and we'll have to have provisions, because the policy also talks about preparing teachers, so the current workers and all the elementary education, school centers that we have in form of Anganwadis, in form of the ICDS centers, in form of the ECC centers, all would be brought into one and would become a part of the primary schools. And therefore, there'll be 6 months training and 1 year diploma courses. So teacher education colleges will have to gear up, and teacher educators will have to prepare themselves, so that they are able to take up these courses, because these will have to be placed. And therefore, coming up with courses on early childhood care education, I think, would be a need of the hour for teacher educators and teacher education colleges. When it comes to school leadership, uh, uh, school principals will also have to have a major shift in their mindset, in terms of looking at the preschool becoming a part of their own school, and therefore looking at the development that is required at preschool years. The second emphasis in school education is made on functional literacy and numeracy. We've all, when we look into the quality of school education, I think sufficient has been said by the ASAR reports and the National Achievement Survey conducted by NCRT in terms of the poor learning levels of children. And this is being emphasized even in the NEP reports, the policy document. And it therefore lays very heavy emphasis on, it says that we need to have achieve functional literacy and numeracy in a mission mode. And therefore we'll have to have multiple strategies, we'll have to engage children in different modalities of learning, and teachers will have to set target for themselves. There'll have to be remedial teaching, there'll have to be peer teaching, we'll also have to include community or people who are really able to make education or learning uh, more realistic to the culture and to the socio cultural environment of the child, so that the child no longer feels alienated from the curriculum, so relating the curriculum with the real life experiences of the child. So that's something which is put up when it comes to FLN. And therefore, in teacher education also, as of now, we have different, I would say, in three major categories in teacher education. And I would say there are teacher education colleges and university departments which only focus on pedagogy of teaching subjects, and not on the content. There are others who don't teach content but take exam. There is assessment of content, and then there's teaching of pedagogy. While there are institutes like the RIEs that we have, which have the 4-year integrated program where content is also taught and pedagogy is also taught, and both are assessed also. Now, why I am bringing this in focus is, when it comes to FLN, it has been found that in many cases, I mean, researchers have pointed out that teachers also have poor knowledge of the basic fundamentals of literacy and numeracy, because largely we have our teaching which had focused on memory and rote learning. And therefore, when teachers have to teach to kids, perhaps it's the same rote learning or memory which is emphasized. And therefore, teacher education colleges would also have to rework on their entire strategy to really look into the content knowledge of the teachers, the future teachers also who are coming, and is also the in-service teachers. Like, so how the fundamentals, the clarity in the fundamentals, especially when it comes to literacy and numeracy, how do we really work on them, so that learning is not rote, and learning is not just memory oriented. So I think that's the emphasis in FLN that has been put. Another emphasis in school education is on curtailing the dropouts and the um, dropouts and the improving the retention rate. This is more so with regard to the government schools, where we know there's lot of dropout happening from the government schools, and children are moving to the private schools, and therefore really bringing that accountability in the government school setup, so that there is good quality of education, and we do not have this movement from government to private. And this is something which is very, or even leading to out of school children. So how is education being able to deliver, and therefore what do we do to understand the contextual causes that leads to dropouts, or that leads to the child not being able to, successful grade completion does not take place. So this is another area which is being talked about in the policy. Apart from it, there's an emphasis. The fourth point talks about curriculum and pedagogy in schools, and there is high emphasis on multidisciplinary learning, and there's emphasis on holistic, integrated pedagogies of learning. And therefore, once again, teacher education, there's a huge role that teacher education will have to take up in terms of our own traditional understanding of what teaching learning is. Because every teacher, for that matter, the way methods, teaching methods are dealt, or pedagogical classes are dealt, will have to be reworked. We will have to have uh, while in schools, if we are offering multidisciplinary setup, how teacher education actually prepares teachers for dealing with this multidisciplinary setup, and therefore understanding content from multiple perspectives and looking at it holistically demands an entire shift in the mindset and in the approach of teacher educators. A lot of training at the level of teacher educators also would be required, because unless we have that, we will not be able to excuse me for a moment. Unless we have that, we'll not be able to um, will be not be able to train our teachers, our in-service teachers, or even our future teachers for that matter. Because whatever content, for example, if I have to recall my B.Ed days, I recall that demonstration method or heuristic method was also taught through lecture. So if I were to say a child that you should use a heuristic method, and this is how you do a heuristic method, a lecture on what heuristic method would be given, rather than actually teaching that entire content through heuristic method. So what is more prevalent and rather simpler actually, because that gives a lot of command to the teacher or the teacher educator for that matter, is lecture method. And therefore, and with the kind of a burden that a teacher has in terms of syllabus completion and lot of other administrative responsibilities, adhering to lectures and going in uh, 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 going in a very compartmentalized fashion. In fact, in the policy document, it's mentioned as hard separation. So separation of subjects into, okay, we are doing science, so this is how it has to be dealt with. We are doing humanities, or we are doing arts, and this is how it has to be dealt with. So giving very sectorial approach in dealing with in teaching, I think we will have to rework on all those traditional ways of learning and teaching. And there's a heavy emphasis on curriculum and pedagogy in that sense. So how learners are expected to and should be uh, reducing the curriculum, making learning more experiential, empowering the students to have flexible choices. So while all of this would have structural and governance issues also, but I'm talking more from the point of view of what we can do. What we cannot do and what the government has to do is could be dealt with, but then there has to be a different setup in actually discussing all those aspects. Giving one example of what I mean by, for example, when we say giving flexibility and course choices. So if, let's say, CBSE or the state government gives a list of courses that a child can pick and choose from, but it gets limited if the school in which the child is studying does not have teachers teaching those courses, or does not have the required infrastructural facility for it. So even if CBSE offers, I am limited in the sense that my neighborhood school where I'm studying only have 2 courses or 3 courses or 5 courses from which I have to choose. So it limits in that sense. So this is something at the macro level with the state and the central administration or structures governance. We'll have to look at it and decide. But at the teacher education and the classroom teaching level, I think what we've got to prepare ourselves is more from the pedagogical point of view, uh, where we are able to interconnect different subjects, topics, and look at them holistically and work towards it. Multilingualism is also promoted in a big way, where the dominance of or the hegemony of the dominant culture can be done away with. And when I say hegemony, it's in multiple ways. For example, um, if we look at it, if you look at English as a language, so all the countries where the Britishers ruled and had their colonies have English as one of the major languages, either as the official language or at least as a medium of instruction in the schools and the institutes of learning. And unfortunately, it has so happened that it has not just remained as a medium of instruction. It has also become as a measure of one's intelligence. So if there's a person who is really talking in very impressive English, we think, oh, he's very intelligent or she's very intelligent. As against that, if there's somebody who is really talking in their own mother tongue and is not able to be so fluent in English, perhaps that is considered to be a sign of not so very intelligent. So this is unfortunate part, and therefore the curriculum lays a very heavy emphasis on multilingualism, the power of language, allowing children to really, especially when it comes to school education, to study in their own mother tongue in the formal years of learning. Is the emphasis. The challenge also is huge in this sector, because we need to have our entire reading material, textbooks, curriculum in those different languages. So when we talk of Tripura, perhaps we have huge literature in Bengali, but we may not have literature in the tribal language. And therefore, there are many parts of Tripura, perhaps, where people are not so very, especially in the early years, children are not so very conversant in Bengali also. So for them to really understand Bengali is also a challenge, and therefore really giving that kind of opportunity, preparing literature or maybe even a small dictionary of words, converting from Bengali to the tribal languages, I think is very important. So that's the emphasis that comes to school education. Uh, Another point I would say is about curricular integration, which I think we've touched upon, curricular integration of the essential subjects, especially in terms of skills and capacities. There's this. How do we really bring the local content and flavor in the textbooks is something which is emphasized. And then there's this big emphasis on transforming the assessments. There's also, for the first time, the policy has mentioned about gifted students. So we've always talked about children with special needs, we've talked about slow learners, we've talked about learning disabilities, but uh, uh, we've not specifically talked about special children, gifted children. And in that sense, neither in our teacher education or in our schools or centers we have curriculum which can promote and support gifted children who are capable of learning beyond their chronological age, or have their brains developed beyond the restrictions of chronological age. So I think the policy discusses on how and what we need to do for special and gifted children as well. Um, there's a lot on teachers. I'm not picking up that area because it's more of governance, and uh, it talks about teacher recruitment, teacher deployment. The good parts I'll just mention about it. It for the first time talks of really curbing the teacher transfers, making the teacher transfers and teacher promotions a very transparent process, so where corruptions could be curtailed in that sense, where teachers have flexibility in really moving from one level to another. For the first time, it talks about incentivizing good work, because in the government setup, uh, it is very easy to really not work and still not be questioned, the way the entire the structural and the governance processes were mentioned. But now it talks about really incentivizing teachers who do good work, uh, and it really puts, although there are no levels created, but in terms of, you can say, abstract levels, but in terms of saying that senior teacher, or that ways in terms of grade, or in terms of monetary benefits, or in terms of professional development, it puts that teachers will have some kind of career advancement even within their own levels. So career management and progression is a major part. Teacher transfers, it talks about teacher professional development. For the first time, it has put up that every teacher, matlab, it's fixed in terms of number of hours that every teacher has to have in terms of professional development. But the teacher has an autonomy of freedom to decide how one will complete the number of learning hours. So let's say it says 50 hours of professional development in a year. So unlike what it happened earlier, where the state office, the project office, let's say Samagra Siksha, would conduct a training and then invite all teachers. So based on the nomination, so if you are nominated, even whether you need this area, whether you need to train yourself in this area or not, irrespective of your needs, you had to join for the training program and you had to take that training. And there were teachers who were trained in multiple areas, and there were other teachers who did not receive any kind of training. So um, we did not have any mechanism that uh, actually saw to it that all teachers are trained, and teachers and based on the assessment of their own needs and learning areas, based on the specialization that a teacher has. So now there is flexibility in the sense that every teacher has to get themselves trained for a fixed 50 hours a year, and therefore it's the teacher who decides how I'm going to meet up for my 50 hours. And therefore, if you have not completed your 50 hours of professional training in a year, that would be counted in your career progression and in the incentive you receive or you don't receive as a result of it. So an accountability is also set up in that sense. Teacher education is discussed in detail, but once again, a huge area. I don't know, Uttam sir had too much confidence that I'll be able to do everything together. But I don't think, but it's an entire area. The now the emphasis is on uh, having 4-year integrated B.Ed program, and really bringing down uh, the 1-year programs or the 2-year programs, restricting them and phasing them out. So they will not be stopped immediately, but they'll be gradual. So they are promoting 4-year integrated B.Ed program. They are promoting multidisciplinary colleges and university departments to really take up this 4-year integrated program, so that gradually all those private B.Ed colleges that had come up and were not providing quality at the same time, uh, rather was selling, it was marketization and too much of commercialization in teacher education. I recall in 2008-9, when we used to study the data of teacher education colleges across the country, it came to somewhere around 300. And after this 2008, in between 2008 to 2012, the spike was such huge that today we have around 18,000 teacher education colleges, university departments, and all included put together. So there was so huge a commercialization in teacher education. Some of it were really, really very, very poor quality, and almost degrees were sold without having given any kind of knowledge or learners. So that is, there's a huge emphasis on really curtailing all that, and therefore only those colleges that have multidisciplinary departments can take up for your integrated, and eventually this will be phased out. So that's the major emphasis that has come. Curriculum framework at all levels, school education and teacher education has to be emphasized. Equity is put up in a big way. Once again, it is connected, so I'm not taking it here. It's also put up in higher education. Maybe if there are questions around it, we could take up in the question answer round. I'm moving to the seventh point, which is on effective resourcing. And the seventh point is more about uh, governance and about resourcing in schools. So as we understand with RTE, there was a lot of since education becoming a fundamental right, emphasis on government's role, both central and state government, in terms of providing the basic facilities, infrastructural and human, to the schools, in terms of the maintaining the PTRs, in terms of quality education, in terms of providing neighborhood schools. All this was emphasized in a big manner. But as we all know, with the program structures, we could in a way, I mean, this is not to say that we have not done any good thing all these years. We have 1.5 million schools. We have made a huge progress in terms of infrastructural development in the schools also. Today, matlab, around 95 to 98% schools have toilets, have drinking water facilities, have minimum matlab 2 to 3 rooms which are required. In that sense, we have made a huge progress, but we still lag behind in terms of that, because of the even if we are following the RT norms of 1:30, there are schools which are very small in nature. And when I say very small, they would have 10 students, less than 30 students. And therefore, you cannot have, in terms of cost effectiveness, you cannot have more than 2 teachers, or you cannot have more than 1 teacher in places where there are less than 10 children. Now, economic, if we look at cost effectiveness point of view and the economic rationale, perhaps we would say that's fine. But when we look at the pedagogic and the actually the rights based perspective rather than the managerial discourse, when we look at the rights based perspective, even after having provided access to the children, perhaps the children will not get quality, because the single teacher, whether he she will teach, or will look at the organization of the school, whether he she will teach or maintain the or even if he she teaches, perhaps what subjects he she will teach. You cannot expect single teacher to be really omnipotent in terms of or competent in all subjects in all areas, and be able to deal with. So, so there are a number of issues in this. So I'm coming to what is it that this policy proposes in terms of efficient resourcing, and what it says. I've just brought the historical context, like even the Kothari Commission mentioned about this challenge of effective resourcing, and had proposed the idea of school complexes first in 64-66. And the same was emphasized in the National Policy on Education in 68 and then in 1986. So in a huge manner, in fact, this entire area of school complexes, although it couldn't be as successful as that, but if we look at how we've grown in terms of, I've mentioned these policies also to tell how we've grown in terms of expansion of school education, in terms of the government's efforts in the area of school education, and the provisions that are made. So when we became independent in, I would say, 1947, we had some 3% literacy rate and 18% GDP, which was which for a country really to balance itself economically and socially and invest for its people's development. It was really, really a very, very challenging task. And therefore, the first commission that came up in independent India was not in school education, it was in higher education, thinking that higher education would add on to the GDP and would make the economy a little more stabler. Uttam sir, please let me know how much time I have. I'm just going on, it seems. So you can stop me because there are other speakers as well.
No, ma'am,
Uh,
you have time, 15 minutes more time you have.
oh, I have 15 minutes more.
Yeah, you can take some question answer also after
Okay,
you finish.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. I will soon finish this and we'll take some question answers.
Okay, okay.
So I think it was only in 64, 66, why I'm discussing the historical perspective. It was only in 64, 66 that the Kothari Commission looked at education holistically. So included all the three basically: primary education, secondary education, and higher education, and looked at it in a continuum. And with the suggestions that came up from Kothari Commission, we had our first policy on education, and then based on it, the revisions were made, and we had our second policy on education, and then the second policy on education emphasized on the poor quality of schooling facilities, and this term Operation Blackboard was then borrowed from medical, the term operation, which is to say that our schools are in such a pathetic condition unless we operate, unless there is some major surgery done, perhaps will not be able to revive and provide quality education. And therefore, in a mission mode, in an operation, the way operations in defense or in medical are carried out, which are target oriented, focused. So this was Operation Blackboard was focused on providing minimum facilities. So a lot of fabricated rooms also came up where constructions were not possible during this time. So at least having blackboards, having table and chairs, having some classrooms, having some books, having some cupboards, all these things came up. Infrastructure, minimum infrastructural facilities were proposed then. Gradually, we had this program of nutritional support to primary education, which is known as midday meal, which was to really stop the dropout, give nutritional support to children where they are not able to have at home, and really bring them to schools. With the DPP, furthermore, teacher trainings. Infrastructural support, and lot of other facilities came to the entire sector of school education. With the success of DPP, Sarva Siksha Abhiyan had more investment made into it. And now we have the Samagra Siksha, which once again looks at school education in a continuum, including early childhood care as well. So, but with all of this, with the promise of really making education reach to the most marginalized sections of our community and the most hard to reach sections, uh, there was emergence of small schools in a big way. And therefore the policy document quotes that there are 28% of our primary schools and 14.8% of our excuse upper primary schools have less than 30 students, and most of them, average number of students per grade is about 14. In some schools it is even less than 6. So we have around 1 lakh approximately single teacher schools. And uh, this is something disturbing in the sense, not just because we are not able to effectively resource these schools, but also that this having schools in such pockets, while we this helped us provide access, but this also limited these schools in terms of their growth. And the schools were isolated because they were based in small hamlets, which were very, very distant from each other, and therefore number of issues. For example, there was hardly uh, any monitoring that could happen in these small schools in the most interior and tribal pockets. There were issues of teacher absenteeism, issues of student absenteeism, issues of poor quality of education, uh, lack of resourcing, and lot of such aspects came up with small schools, and therefore these became the economically suboptimal and operationally complex in terms of teacher deployment, in terms of provision of critical physical resources. This also brought challenge for teachers in terms of multiple grade teaching at a time, teaching multiple subjects without having any prior background to it, and limiting these schools in terms of the physical resources like labs or sports equipment, and this isolation of these small schools, which had a very negative effect on the teaching learning process. And therefore the idea of school complexes was born as a result of it, the need being that at least we stop some kind of isolation. So if there are, let's say, 10 within a range of some 10 to 15 kilometers, there are some 5 schools, 8 schools. If all these schools are brought into one complex, now complex is not some physical structure, I'm looking at it all as an abstract structure, but at least if there's a senior secondary school in that 8 to 10 kilometers area, that senior secondary school could take up the role of a complex where you are uh, kind of getting connected, and you are taking care of the neighborhood schools. So where a single teacher had to manage for himself or herself, now is associated to a larger, bigger school, and therefore their needs get taken care of. So isolation, addressing the isolation, sharing of instructional work and academic resources. I am a single teacher school, I do not have all the required competencies, but a school 3 kilometers from mine has a teacher teaching mathematics, or a school 6 kilometers from mine has a lab facility. Once in a while, can I take my children there to give them an exposure to what it is? Can we exchange resources? Things like that were conceptualized. Sharing of physical and material resources, collaborating for collective improvement and growth, in-house, in-service trainings. Now that we've become a complex, so there are some 8 to 10 schools in it. Even if, let's say, there are single or two teacher schools, we'll still have around 20 teachers. Now, because we are in the same social context, our challenges of the community, challenges of the children, challenges of the geography would be similar in nature. So if we come together to really discuss on what are the challenges we face in terms of teaching learning, perhaps that could become a platform for having our own in-house training, which will be very, very need-based, very, very realistic, and based on address to the immediate requirement of these schools, rather than going to a centralized, a macro level training, which may be very good in quality, but still does not help a teacher answer her own questions, which she faces in her own school. Uh, Simply because we are not able to have that one-to-one engagement in such a huge setup. So while the resource person may be very effective, it's the training still did not materialize or translate into improving the classroom teaching learning conditions or processes, and improving the overall school achievement. So with this is a beautiful idea in a way, only if it materializes the way it is conceptualized. So moving to the next. So how did Kothari Commission conceptualize it? Kothari Commission saw it as it is more in terms of establishing those relationships face to face with different schools. So while schools are isolated from each other, how do we really interconnect and form a network of schools? In NP 1986 also it said that school complex is organized by taking a group of elementary schools, high schools, even training schools, if there are some ITIs in the neighborhood, if there are some teacher education colleges in the neighborhood, if all are put together, perhaps there's a lot of cross learning that would take place, and this would help improve the standards in the school. there was this Janardhan Reddy committee established after the NPE 1986 and its program of action, which also mentioned some of the challenges that school complexes would have, but said that how school complex will promote a network of institutions on a flexible pattern to provide synergic alliances and encourage professionalism among teachers, to ensure observance of norms and conduct, and to enable the sharing of experiences and facilities. And therefore, it saw school complexes as a cluster of 8 to 10 institutions to reinforce the exchange of processes, resources, materials, teaching aids on a sharing basis. I'll skip on this. What does NEP, the draft that had come 2019? It talks about the school complex as a step towards the introduction of a new culture of sharing of resources in an optimal way. So rather than really looking at the government providing everything and only then we will begin to really work. So we why not we really make optimal use of the community of schools that we have and share resources from each other. While there's a huge critique on this aspect also, which says that it is the government giving up on its responsibility and really asking. So it's about 100% output and no input. That's how also this has been criticized. But when I look at it from the field experience, field point of view, it really shows that there is a possibility, and not just a possibility of really forming a network, not just in terms of sharing of infrastructure resource, but more so, it is my own experience that unless teachers come together and unless they feel passionate about their own growth, about their own knowledge, about sharing with each other, learning from one's own experiences, teaching learning and teacher education will never change. Quality will not improve because someone else with some great knowledge is coming and telling you something. I feel personally quality will improve when you personally feel that this is something that you need to learn or develop yourself on. And therefore something that network of teachers feel that our school, let's say it's a school is an institute, and all teachers feel कि नहीं हमारे स्कूल में ये दिक्कत है, हमारे बच्चे इसे नहीं कर पा रहे हैं, हमको ये करना है, and therefore we all come together to really address that challenge that we have, and perhaps that would really lead to improvement. So I really feel that if the way it's conceptualized, if it turns out to be, this would become a step towards developing professional learning communities in that sense. So the policy highlights on the role of school complexes in terms of, so we already have these cluster resource centers and the block resource centers that came up during the DPP and the Sarva Siksha Abhiyan times. Uh, but what is required is those centers remain more administrative units. And therefore, once again, as I was emphasizing earlier, it's only when teachers come together for their own development and for their own cause that these centers would become more academic centers than bureaucratic units at the cluster or the block level. That's very important. And therefore, the role is more about even the district education officer and the directorate of school education devolving authority and power to the school complexes, helping them establish themselves as semi-autonomous unit. In fact, the policy mentions how these school complexes uh, could legally, um, uh, in the sense register themselves as independent society, so that for every little thing they do not have to write a note to the state or the district level to really fund or grant them. So even if you are, let's say, engaged in public resourcing, if you are engaged in taking CSR funding, perhaps you've established yourself as a society, registered yourself as a autonomous society, maintaining those accounts, utilizing the funds on your own, would be more simpler. So there'll be a lot of cut on the bureaucratic levels of governance which are there, which actually slows down the pace of change or so cutting down on all those processes is also something the policy suggests of. So the DOs and the BOs then do not have to deal with individual schools. Otherwise, at the district level, a DO may have to deal with, let's say, 2,000 to 3,000 schools, depending upon how big the district is, because the DO will simply not have the government schools, will also have the private schools. And therefore, it is practically impossible and inhuman to really think of a DO being able to really deal with all those schools, monitor them, see to their quality, and lot of other aspects which one is expected to. So now, with the establishment of school complexes, what would happen is that the DO would have to deal only with the school complexes, and the school complexes in return will have to look at only 8 to 10 schools that they have in their own network. So I look at this as a positive step in terms of really helping. There's another aspect that I want to mention here. Of a cluster which is actually practicing this. The entire success of this would depend on 3 dimensions. Now, there are 3 dimensions to human relationships: the way in which we interact, one, the content of the interaction, and third, the circumstances in which the interaction occurs. So leadership is very, very important, because anyone who is the leader of the school complex will decide how the complex would function. So it's about the kind of human relations that those schools have developed upon them amongst themselves would decide how the school functions. So how is the interact? So what are the processes that are established for interaction? What are the patterns that are set for interaction? How the platform is created so that a primary school is also able to come upon the equal platform as is a secondary school, as is an elementary school. And we all come together and think that our role is not just to improve the education in our own school, but look at the entire community as a whole. So the content, so what are you using as a means to interact? For example, we have this online platform for learning. Now, what is it that I am interacting with you will decide how engaged you are with me, and what is the entire setup in which we are interacting, our circumstances that has brought us together today, nationally, internationally, we are connecting, also decides how we are able to learn and come together. So this is a small example I would want to share on the point that I'm making, because whatever I'm saying, I learn from the experiences that come from the fields, from whether it's Tripura or Himachal or Gujarat or Uttarakhand. There's a lot of learning that comes from the field, and this is a picture that you see of a cluster, Katraing cluster in the district Kullu of Himachal Pradesh. And here you see a cluster head, or a principal of a senior secondary school, and there are principals, head teachers of 17 other schools in the neighborhood. And this gentleman is conducting a meeting with the heads of all those 17 schools, and they are discussing on different aspects that their schools require. This is just a geography to help you understand. Moving to the next, heads meeting, and how they are discussing on the agenda that they need to really work on for their change. Cluster meetings are not just taking place in one school, they take place in rotation. So when 17 head teachers move to one school, perhaps the school that they are moving to becomes little more conscious, because there are 17 heads that are moving to their school. So they need to, uh, without even a scheduled inspection, actually an inspection takes place, because there are 17 heads coming to your school. So you really want your school to be good. So that's the strategy that they had adopted, that every month we'll have a meeting in different schools, not just in one school. The meeting doesn't happen in the senior secondary school alone. It happens in all different schools. So all schools improve in that fashion. So the cluster meetings used as teacher professional development. So one of our agenda is to really work out on our school. So we have a maths teachers meeting, we have a science teachers meeting, we have a social science teachers meeting, and all of this they do it at the cluster level. They have not, this is not based on some funding that has come up from the state or the cluster or some government document and order telling them that you've got to train yourself. This is because they have felt the need, and this is because they decided they want to improve. They are doing this. And that I feel is the power of people taking intrinsic decisions to really work. So that's something I want to. This is cluster based student, all students. So my school has, let's say, 30 children only. Now, what competitions will I conduct for them? But when I'm engaged in a cluster in this fashion, perhaps now I have 300 children to compete and participate and learn from. And so the entire cluster comes together to conduct all the festivals, competitions. This is one that you see school development plans. All 17 schools have made their own school development. This is a meeting where they are sharing their own school development plans. They put together this, then come up with a cluster development plan. So that's how learning can really take place. Widening the horizons, giving career counseling to children, developing self and group learning habits. This is a usual classroom setup that we see. What they have done as a change is they have changed the way the benches and chairs are arranged. So now a usual didactic mode of arrangement would be all the children are facing the blackboard or the green board, but here the children are facing each other. They are sitting in groups in a cafeteria. It's the same classroom. It's just that the tables and chairs are changed, the desks and the benches, their orientation are changed. So that compels the teacher also to come up with group activities where children can learn. So the teacher no more has to stick herself to the blackboard or the green board and keep on lecturing like I'm doing right now. But the teacher can really make the children work in groups. So that's how it is. So the role of school leadership is very important in school complex, and therefore leadership development. There would be some limitations to it unless the distance and the remoteness in the rural pockets is addressed. Perhaps this may not function. Collaborative work culture is very, very important, and therefore developing those human holders is very, very important. That would lead to the success of this. Thank you so much. I just want to end with this. And we can have questions, or maybe if you want, we could have other presentations and then have questions together. So maybe people can put up their questions on the chat box, and I would keep looking at all those, and at the end also I can answer. I mean, it's totally as you say. I'm open.
Thank you, madam. Thank you very much for such a wonderful presentation. And you really, touched the reforms in school education in the new national education policy. You also discussed, the need of or the provisions that has been kept for continuous professional development for the teachers. You discussed actually, you touched the teacher education, and also you discussed the importance at the grassroots, how the teacher take ownership if we really want to transform the education system. And also you highlighted, this significance of school complex, which already, mentioned. We know that in Kothari Commission 64, 66, and now again it is re-emphasized. And also the practical example that you have shared, it really helped us to understand the content. Now, ma'am, there is a quick question for you. Uh, Actually, many teachers have joined us from different parts of India also. We have one teacher, Satinder Singh Path, and his question is, what are the plans to improve pre-primary education in government schools in National Education Policy 2020?
In fact, pre-primary schools were earlier, as I said, left to themselves. So we had these standalone Anganwadi schools, we had these standalone pre-nursery setups, or the ICDS centers, left to, in many cases, the least, I would say, in that village. So there's somebody who studied fifth standard, there's somebody who studied seventh standard, somebody who studied eighth standard. You put them into the Sanganwadi centers or ICDS centers, and it was more of as caretaking units. But the kind of focus that now policy has important, significant things that I see in the policy to really help these ECCs, pre-primary schools to grow up is one, giving them an equal stature. There's a cadre for ECCE also that is being thought of, that has been said in the policy document. So now, like the earlier understanding ki, matlab ek aya caretaker, as I'm saying, उस प्रकार का जो understanding है, that is not there. So a teacher in a pre-primary school will have a similar stature like a teacher in a primary or an elementary school, because he also will have to have a proper degree. So so anyone, so even the current teachers who are there in these pre-primary schools will have to take up 1-year diploma, or will have to take up 6 months, depending upon what is their basic degrees, and will have to really only then will be able to continue. And this is, as I said, there'll be proper trainings conducted at the cluster and the block level for these teachers. So there's a cadre of teachers which is now being thought of. These centers will be included with the primary schools so that they get all the resources in terms of resourcing these schools. It is being thought of. There's an entire curriculum which is being designed for early childhood care education. So it's not anything or everything that came to the mind of teacher that could be taught, but you will have to be going in a focused manner. So that's the entire plan, which is very important. What else? That's it.
Yeah, thank you, madam. This is really a joy to listening to you. So, dear participants, you all really, such a disciplined participant. I hardly witness in any online platform. All are mute and, very, irrelevant chats are not there. So thank you very much for such responsible participants. I have been just, informed that our director sir just, he left because he had got an urgent meeting, but he will join us. Whenever he joins us, we will listen from our director sir also. But now I would like to invite our resource person from Bangladesh, Dr. Jabbar Idil Khani. He will deliver his speech on moral education and we. You must know actually Dr. Idil Khani is a very, very popular teacher, I should say, throughout the world, because he keeps visiting in many countries, more or less 50, 60 countries he keeps visiting, and he comes to our state also. He has done his PhD in applied physics and electronics from Rajshahi University, Bangladesh. And he is also the recipient of Best Young Scientist of Bangladesh in the year 1990. And he was the former professor of Bangladesh Institute of Technology, Rajshahi. And he is actually very popular for his inspiring and motivational speeches. And his love is actually, the spiritual and moral education. So, sir, we are very much thankful you joined on time and you are patiently listening to us. We all are eager to listen to you. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. And actually, it's a great pleasure to be here among you. And thank you to the organizers for inviting me and having me. And as Mr. Uttam said, actually, my interest is basically in moral education. And today, of course, I'm going to focus on a very basic question that actually, though it is a very basic question, but it can affect the way we look at the moral education. It's about the basic nature of man. The question is that when the babies are born, actually, do they have a moral philosophy? Are they moral beings? What is in their nature? This is a question that usually we can ask from the children when they can communicate. But actually asking this question when they can communicate is already too late, because you don't know whether they have learned what they say or whether it is innate. So last, actually, say 1 decade, there is a baby lab in US that they have done wonderful experiments on babies, and they have discovered very important lessons that I will share some of them, and then probably a little bit we'll talk about its impact on the way we look at our babies and children and education in general, and especially moral education. So we know that suppose a 5-month-old baby that has not yet learned anything from about morality, but cannot communicate, at that time there has been some very interesting experiments set up, because as young as 5 months old, children or babies like puppet show. So the experiment is using puppet show to see how does a baby feel or think. In this puppet show, for example, there are 3 puppets, and one of the puppets is trying to achieve something, suppose climb over something or open a box. And there are these 2 other puppets that one of them is very helpful, always trying to help this puppet with whatever it's doing. And there is another puppet which is very mean and always disturbs this puppet and always tries to harm him. So then after this puppet show, they take these 2 puppets. One of them is very useful and nice, and another one is very mean. They take it to the baby. Baby cannot say anything, but babies can reach and take a puppet. And by reaching the puppet, actually they are choosing their favorite, their puppet. So vast majority of babies in these experiments actually reach the nice puppet. This is very interesting, which actually shows babies, when they are born, they know the difference between being nice and being mean, and they favor the nice one. They can choose between good and bad. So this is the most basic experiment they have done. Even from this most basic experiment, what we learn in moral education is that very often we think that we have to teach children what is right and what is wrong, what is moral and what is immoral. But through this experiment, we know that we already know that children actually know this, have this. This is an innate understanding among children, among babies. They understand between right and wrong, between nice and mean. Then there is, of course, there are a lot of experiments. I'm just referring to a few of them. Then there is this next experiment that actually in this baby lab is done. And in this experiment is the same experiment is done. So now the baby knows which one is nice and which one is not nice. Or there is a puppet, say, that does very nasty things, steals the ball in the puppet show and does very nasty things. So then there are 2 other puppets. Then one of them actually is nice to this nasty puppet, and another one actually punishes this nasty puppet. So now they take these 2 puppets in front of child or baby to choose whether baby chooses the one who is nice to the nasty puppet or actually is punishing the nasty puppet. Again, very interesting consequence or result is that actually babies choose the one that punishes the nasty puppet. So again, from this, those who are involved in these experimentations, they have concluded that there are some universal moral codes, and we are born with those moral codes. So we understand justice and we favor justice. So this is another very important learning, that if there is a universal moral code, no matter where these babies are born, in which ethnic group, in which country, in which race, which whatever, but actually there is a universal moral code. Then there is some other experiments. So far, actually, the experiments showed that actually there is this moral codes in the children. They know right and wrong. So there are a lot of things innate, which is very good, which is like a higher nature, which is shows that actually these children are noble, and children are noble. Children are really most important, actually, you can say, creatures in the world, because they are the future and they are also vulnerable. So we have to love them and do whatever we can do. But then there are some other experiments that actually show some other facts, which I can refer to. There are some dark sides also to the nature of humanity, to the nature of us, which is innate when we are born. Now, what is this experiment? This experiment is as simple as, say they bring 2 bowls of snacks in front of baby. So babies can easily reach one of them and show which one they like, whatever it is. So the baby reaches to one of them and likes and prefers this type of snacks to other type of snacks. Avoids the other type of snacks, which shows that baby doesn't like it, and reaches to this bowl of a snack, which baby likes it. Then what happens now when they bring 2 other puppets or 2 other dolls, whatever, and it shows that one of them likes the snacks that this baby likes, and one of them likes the snacks that baby hates or doesn't like, at least. So it's very clear that one of the puppets likes very similar to this baby, actually likes the same snack, and the other one doesn't like. Then they bring these 2 puppets. Again, here it's very clear that the child reaches to the one which is similar to himself. So chooses the puppet which is like himself or herself and likes the same snacks. So far can be fine. But then those who do these experiments want to know that what is the feeling of this baby about the one which is unlike her or him, which is not like him, doesn't like the snack that he or she likes. So what they do, they take the one which is not like this baby, likes a different type of snacks, to the same puppet show, and not this, there are 2 other puppets, which one of them is mean and punishes this puppet, and one of them is helpful and helps it and is nice to this puppet. Here, the dark part of the baby is revealed. Because when they bring these 2 puppets in front of baby, baby reaches the one that punishes the other puppet, which is not like him or her. This shows that, unfortunately, being racist, being prejudiced, actually, unfortunately, is innate. So it's not that it's very clear is not that children are born with these all moral things and we have to only take care of them not to learn the wrong things. Actually, our education have to teach them so that they can get rid of their dark side. Children have this dual nature. Humanity, all men have this dual nature. We are at the end of night and beginning of the day. There is a dark side in us and there is a light in us. And education has to strengthen us to build upon this light and try to minimize the darkness. These forces, negative forces have to be subdued. That is the education, the duty of moral education. There has been some other experiments now with a little bit elder or younger children, but elder babies, which all of us also have noticed it in practically with our children. We have noticed it. Actually, what they have done, this is maybe the last experiment I'm talking about. I don't want to take a lot of your time. But in this experiment, like a 3 or 4 year old child, they bring. So in this experiment, they say that you can choose between sets of, say, pencils or whatever. But each set of these pencils that you can choose, there is another set of pencils in front of them that they say that next participant, next child, when he or she enters, if you choose this set, the set in front of it will be given to the child that is coming after you. So, for example, there is this in set A. If he chooses that which has 2 pencils, in front of it there is also another 2 pencils. Means next child will receive also 2 pencils. But in another set, there is only 1 pencil. That if he chooses this one, will receive 1 pencil, but in front of it there is 0 pencil. Like his or next participant will not receive any pencil. You will be astonished to know that vast majority of the children below the age of 8, they choose the one which they receive less, but the one which is other, which is not like them, which they don't know him, he will receive nothing. So they are ready to be relatively better than others. They like to be relatively better than others, no matter how much they get. Here, he may even, there are some experiments that shows even he may take 10 pencils, but doesn't choose that because the other one will have also 10 pencils or even 12 pencils. So he has 10 pencils, but he is relatively not as good as the other one. But here he will receive or she will receive only 2 or 3, but because relatively receives more than other, chooses this one. Which again shows that our moral education should focus on what things like, I mean, selfishness, like we have noticed how children up to some age, how self-centered they are, how greedy they are, how sometimes we think that they are inconsiderate towards others. So this is innate. But as long as we know that how education has to focus on these things and those most important moral issues, which are very important. But then when they continue this experiment with those, for example, who are 8 years old and have been received some moral education, experiment shows that at that stage, children start to actually choose the one that they get more pencils or whatever, even though the other person receives also high number of pencils or chocolates or whatever is in the experiment. And even it has seen that at the elder ages like 10 or 11, when they have received moral education, even they are ready to sacrifice so that other person receives more. For example, if he receives 10, the other person will receive also 10. But if he receives 5, the other person will receive 20. So after this, having this moral educations, then this person is ready to sacrifice for another person who is coming in the next experiment that he even doesn't know him or her. But sacrifices, accepts fewer of these chocolates or whatever, so that the one who is coming will receive higher number of gifts. So this shows the importance of what and where we have to focus. I think it's very clear that because there are some philosophical, what you call theories, that some people think children are all good, only we have to protect them so that they don't learn bad things. So this is absolutely wrong. Children are good. There are so many good aspects to them, but there are also dark aspects to that. Or there are other experiments, other what you call philosophies that says children are like whiteboard. So you have to only take care of them so that nobody writes wrong things on them. It's not as simple as that. I think if there is one takeaway from what I say, besides what we already know that children have dual nature, is that do not underestimate these dark forces in our children and even in ourselves. I think we are defeated, we take wrong moral decisions when we underestimate the power of these negative forces within us. Actually, whole life we have to fight with this darkness in us for the greed, for the jealousy, for the pride, for the selfishness, for all those negative things. Is not that once I conquered it, so I have conquered it forever. Life is actually a war that I have to subdue these dark aspects of my life. But during childhood especially, we have to take it very seriously. And moral education is not just another thing, just something that we have to do. It's just secondary. It's actually something that can ensure a success of a person in life, morality of person for whole life. I'll not take any more of your time. It was a pleasure to talk to you. If there is any question in the later when other friends present their presentation, then I'm ready to take those questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. You really, with these few examples and experiments, you emphasized actually the need of moral education. And also very nicely, you have pointed out actually the dark aspects that prevail in our children, and we have to understand it. And accordingly, we need to give them environment. And so nicely you said actually life is a war, and every day, every moment we need to fight against the negative forces that are within us. This is really a great point that you mentioned. So now I would like to request the participants, if you have any question, you can unmute and you can ask, because it's a great privilege to have him. You can ask or you can post also on in our chat box. Now it is up to you. I would like to give the participants a few minutes for question answer. You can ask to Dr. Idil Khani sir or to Dr. Kashyapi ma'am also before our next resource person joins with us. Any question?
I think there is no question.
Okay, so yeah, you can post your question, or you can unmute, or you can raise your hand also. There is a hand raising option is there. Kashopi ma'am. Hello, Kashopi ma'am, can you hear us?
Hear you.
Yeah, ma'am, there is a question for you from one of my colleagues from Institute of Advanced Studies in Education, Dr. Partho Sarathy Ghosh.
Okay.
His question is how we can make our government school complexes like prestigious school like DPS, DAV, and how can we actually why everyone prefer to admit their kids in private school, not in government school? So how can we upgrade the level of government schools?
Okay. Actually, not one question, 3 questions.
Okay.
So first is, how do we really improve our
Yes, ma'am. Actually, 3 questions. Thank you, ma'am, for responding.
Yeah, how do we really improve our school complexes and make them like the schools that you mentioned? Perhaps Partho sir that you mentioned, right? The name of the colleague?
Yes. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Partho sir, I want to get out of this mentality of becoming like someone. So whether it is becoming like some individual or becoming like some organization, perhaps we'll have to understand what is the right thing that is required for us in our own context. But I get your point. Your point is more about giving quality. So
Yes, ma'am.
you've made quality as an equivalent to DPS or any other school, which I don't agree with. Not necessarily just because it's a DPS or a private school that it ensures quality, and not necessarily that just because it's a government school there'll be no quality or less quality. Now, what is required if we want to make all our school complexes or government schools to deliver quality is something we'll have to own those institutes. The major uh, drawback that I see in the institutions or uh, in the Indian conditions is the appointment of teacher is made to an is not made to an organization, it's made to a system. So I'm appointed to the government of Tripura, I'm appointed to the government of India, and therefore my accountability comes to the government of India or government of Tripura than the child who I am teaching, than the school where I am there. And therefore, I will follow to the bureaucratic norms more than following to the child's need or the contextual need. And therefore, the schools are not owned up by teachers in government school setup. What happens in a private school setup? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Very much.
Yeah. What helps in a happens in a private school setup is that there's a trust or there's a board or there are a group of individuals that own that school, and when a teacher is appointed, the teacher is appointed to that school, and therefore the quality, whether the subjects that you are teach, you have to be accountable to those children also and to the school also. Now here the accountability of the teachers is to the system and not to the school, to not to the children but to the larger system. And therefore I do not, when children are not learning, when there is or the issues like teacher absenteeism that we have, or the issues like lack of or poor quality of teaching that we have, comes because I have not owned up those institutes, I have not owned up those children. I don't see that they belong to me, and therefore I have the responsibility, both moral and professional, to really see to it that my children perform better and see to it that there's quality in our own institution as a whole. Perhaps if that kind of mindset, that kind of shift in the thought, if we are able to bring, perhaps every teacher will start owning the school that they are teaching, would start owning those children who they are teaching, and perhaps then the commitment and the passion would, there'll be shift in it, will grow in it, and perhaps I feel that will improve a lot of human relations. In that sense, collaborations will become simpler and easier, because then our focus is clear that the child should learn. We are not about whether I'm getting my monthly salary or not. It's more about whether I'm able to bring a difference to the learning levels of the children or not. And therefore, our entire orientation towards how we are teaching, what we are teaching will depend upon what the child needs and how we can really bring those changes. So we'll not have to look up to someone outside then. We'll kind of discover our own gaps, our own loopholes, and work and improve on it. This is how I think perhaps we will establish our own benchmark. So the example that I showed you from Kullu, now this is happening before the national policy coming up. Nobody has told these school principals to really come together. No order or mandate has come. And perhaps if you visit sometime, happen to visit Himachal, do visit this cluster. Do look at the commitment that they have. It's not a private school setup. It's a government school setup, much better than the private setup as well. So we'll have to really rediscover ourselves and recommit more more coming from the moral and more coming from the professional point of view to really own this up, professional commitment point of view to really own this up. I think we'll be able to do it. When it comes to your second aspect of your question, that how we really make parents, I mean, why are parents attracted towards private schools? Once again, we've built this as a social, like as I talked about English. English has become a measure of one's intelligence than just a medium of instruction or communication. So had I known Bengali fluently, I would have loved to interact with you in Bengali, then talk in English. It's my limitation that I'm talking in English. And just because I talk in English doesn't mean that I'm very smart. This is something that we need to understand. Same is the case with private schools. Perhaps the kind of attire that children come up in, perhaps the language that children in private schools speak, makes parent, the society judges it to be a mark of quality. So if I am with a coat or tie and I'm speaking English, or my child is speaking English, that's a mark of quality. If this doesn't happen in a government school, then perhaps quality is meager. That's how it is taken up. This is all I would want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. This is really a pleasure to see. It's a joy to see actually how some government schools are really doing their best. And
Yes.
yeah, madam has already given example of Himachal. I think another example we can take from Delhi, the way actually Delhi is reforming the school education. It's a model for the only for the entire country, but also I think for the rest of the world. And
Yes.
so I welcome actually from Delhi government, Mr. Anurag Kundu, and I request my colleague, Srimati Lipika Debarma, to take over. And ma'am, up to you. Over to you, ma'am.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, very much.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for all joining for us for today's webinar and being with us till now. I'm Lipika Debarman, Associate Professor, Department of Political Science, and also convener of Academic Committee, Rabindranath Tagore Mahavidyalaya, Vishalghat, Tripura. Now I would like to invite our next resource person in this webinar, Sri Anurag Kundu. Anurag Kundu sir is a chairperson, Delhi Commission for Protection of Child Rights, a statutory body of Government of Delhi to monitor the implementation of rights of children. He supervises 8 divisions responsible for monitoring the implementation of rights of children. Commission research studies, inquire into specific complaint violations of rights, and advise the government on policy foundation and amendment. He completed his engineering degree from NIT, Kurukshetra, but then turning down 15 lakhs corporate offer, he decided to teach in a slum school in Delhi under Teach for India program. He assisted thousands of underprivileged school children to get their right to education. He plays a vital role in various educational reforms being undertaken by Government of Delhi. So Anurag Kundu sir, over to you.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for the kind words. Am I audible?
Yeah.
All right. Distinguished faculty members, principal ma'am, my speakers who spoke earlier than me, and the speakers who will be speaking much more with much more nuanced manner after me, and Dr. Uttam, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be here and to be able to interact with you all. I hope you all are keeping best health, and I hope you continue to keep your best health in particularly today's times. So I think my topic is centers around technology, and probably Dr. Uttam thought that because I have a background in computer engineering, I would understand technology somewhat. So I think let me put it in two parts. One, what does NEP say about technology? And then what are some of the experiences we've had over the last few months when the schools have remained shut? And the reason last few months experience matters is because given the fact the schools are shut, technology pretty much has remained the only dominant way of reaching out to our children. So I think in some sense, it has been a good pilot, which has indicated possible potential, possible blind spots, gaps, and failures of the use of technology, and how prepared or not we are to use that. So, which is why I'm going to talk a little about NEP, but largely going to draw from the last few months of experiences of some experiments that we have sort of tried to conduct. I think NEP is quite clear. It broadly lays down, there's a specific separate section on using technology. Broadly, it says 3 or 4 things. It says leveraging technology, particularly with respect to assessments, evaluations, and the data analytics. It also says it also talks about the various portals that the MHRD has created, such as Diksha, which is essentially a portal wherein different stakeholders can share their best practices, their programs, and learn from each other. So the online assessments, sharing best practices. And the third, by and large, it talks about Coursera type of courses using a portal called Swayam. Swayam is a portal of MHRD which hosts dozens and dozens of courses across domains, very Coursera kind of courses where you can watch videos, you can do quizzes, you can earn a certification at the end of the course. So that's sort of one portal. So by and large, if I were to put it conceptually, NEP says that we can use technology in collecting data in real time, analyze it, and use it for informing various decisions at multiple levels of hierarchy within the education department. The second, it says the technology can facilitate identification and sharing and dissemination of amazing practices that stakeholders in different parts of the country may be using, and what we can learn from there. And third, it talks about how we can develop new skills or new knowledge using technology. And then, of course, there's a complete write-up on how to do all of this. We require certain digital infrastructure and an attempt to bridge the digital divide that exists. So that's there. But before I move into that, let me relate to what NEP articulates with our experience last few months. So we conducted a survey, in the month of April to understand what percentage of our students have a smartphone, what percentage of our students have internet pack, what percentage of our students can, access or use a smartphone. And we decided that we would take it forward from there once we have an understanding. And broadly, by and large, we realized Delhi is uniquely advantageous position compared to other states. So Dr. Uttam, some of the credit of our education reforms goes not to us, but by the unique advantage that the state of Delhi has by virtue of where it is located and by virtue of the fact that it's a city state and by virtue of the fact that it's a capital. So some of the credit is sort of undue and actually, to the factors that exist. Some disadvantage factors exist for the state similarly. Anyway, so we found by and large 80 to 85, 83% of our children have at least one smartphone in the family, which is a good starting point because 80% plus is not what we were expecting, quite honestly. By and large in Delhi, having a smartphone is equal to having internet pack. Fortunately, in the last few years, internet prices have really plummeted, and perhaps is one of the most. India has probably the cheapest internet packs actually in the world, and we realized barely 2%, 3% people had a smartphone but didn't have internet. So by and large, if you have a smartphone, that pretty much means you have internet. And the third question that we asked was if they have WhatsApp, and we realized WhatsApp is the most commonly used app. So if you have smartphone, you pretty much have internet. It's barring 2% people, and another 2% people, you also, it means that you have WhatsApp as well. So which was a great starting point. Smartphone is equal to what internet pack is equal to WhatsApp. But here is what we learned. Now, on the surface, this sounds amazing, and of course, something needs to be done about those 20% who got missed out as well. But on the surface, it sounds amazing. Now, but here is where the problem starts. One, there's only one smartphone. As the unlocking has begun, typically it's the father who has a smartphone, and he has to step out for work. So the smartphone, although is available in the family, to the child, it's available only in the early morning and at the end of the day. So pretty much means in the day, the smartphone practically is not available to the child. And this is Delhi I'm talking about. And you can extrapolate it, multiplied by number of disadvantages and challenges that children in other states face. Then we realized a household has multiple children, and then both clamor for the same smartphone because they both got to do certain work. Then we realize that the assignment or the teaching and learning methodology has to be in a way which consumes least internet. If it's a video based, they very quickly run out of internet, and if we expect them to recharge, it becomes a very expensive process suddenly, because normal usage of internet is fairly minimal. But when you would want to watch lectures every day, particularly video based or Zoom based or YouTube based, it quickly escalates your the costs you're expected to incur. So that becomes a burden as well. So these are some of the early digital infrastructure challenges that we faced, and we realized there's so many brilliant mobile apps, and they do take care of those children who have those digital infrastructure and have things in place, but most children do not have that in place. And while I'm not against those apps, and those are doing wonderful service to those having digital infrastructure, I am also cognizant that a large fraction of the population does not have that. So we tried the simplest technology possible, which was a mobile phone. Now, mobile phone penetration is very high in this country. Even in the most rural parts, we typically tend to find a mobile phone, even of whatever quality. So what we started doing was SMS-based intervention, wherein an activity per day would be given. An IVR call, a recorded call would be sent to the child, a 45 seconds call, which would then say, Namaskar, aaj ki, good morning. Today's activity is as follows. Number one, whatever. It just goes in for 45 seconds. If a parent misses out, they can always give a missed call, and they immediately get a recorded call back, and they can listen to the activity as many times as they want to. And every day it happened. Now, what we realized in that process was, and of course there's challenges there as well. What we realized was almost like 35 to 40% children and we did an independent survey after that, were doing the SMS-based activities. But here's the problem with technology. What we also realized was children needed to be nudged, helped, supported by the teachers. So in cases where the activity being sent as an SMS or IVR was supplemented by a teacher's phone call, which said कि बेटा क्या कैसे हो, घर पे सब बढ़िया है, आपको ये एक्टिविटी आई होगी आज मॉर्निंग में, आपने कर ली क्या? अच्छा, if you have any doubt, why don't you let me know if you're struggling with it, or ask your query or whatever. So even a technology as simple to use needed a supplementary support from the teacher in the form of a nudge, a phone call, that is, in the form of that human connect to say that what we are sending actually matters, a follow up if the children were doing it, and also support to mentor if they were facing specific queries. And that is what we learned. We have to learn to use technology that's simpler, learn to use technology that's pervasive. TV is another. We couldn't do it because Doordarshan is owned by not Delhi government but by the central government. But TV is a wonderful technology in itself. Unfortunately, when we think of technology, we only think of the artificial intelligence and those sort of jazzy stuff, machine learning. And that's important. I'm not saying that's not important. But when we think of technology, we have to think of technology that is simple to use, pervasive, and already available. So those were some of the learnings that I thought, in some sense matches with NAP, in some sense brings out the contrast. So IVR and SMS-based interventions that we piloted in the in the Delhi government schools showed much better results compared to mobile app-based interventions, particularly for Delhi government schools. Now, for private schools, it may not be the case. It might be very different. And of course, one has to examine their context in order to see what works best for them. What I'm saying may not work best for other context. The opposite may work best. One has to examine the context. But that's what we learned. The technology has to be simple. The technology has to be pervasive, and there has to be a component of finding merger of the technology with the existing school system, with the existing teaching and learning processes, and how we supplement and integrate the two is what is going to define how technology improves learning outcomes, make schools safer, make children feel more included. Otherwise, technology per se can be very exclusionary tool as well. So those were my two bits I thought might be helpful to share. And if you have any questions, please feel free. That's it, Dr. Uttam, from my side.
Lipika ma'am.
Yeah.
If anyone has any question, yeah.
If anyone has a question, happy to take.
Any question from the participant?
Hello, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Sir, I am from Jammu and Kashmir, Mr. Imtiaz Mughal, Diksha content creator and book writer. सर मेरे नज़रिए से ये है कि जो ऑनलाइन एजुकेशन, न्यू पॉलिसी ऑफ एजुकेशन में जो ऑनलाइन सिस्टम जो है, ये तो जम्मू कश्मीर में और लद्दाख में ये तो फेल है, क्योंकि यहाँ 2G तो ना हो सकेगा ना हो रहा है. दैट्स आवर बिग प्रॉब्लम. ये हमारी एक बिग प्रॉब्लम है. जम्मू कश्मीर को रिप्रेजेंट करते हुए मैं यही कहूँगा कि नेशनल पॉलिसी ऑफ एजुकेशन में जो ऑनलाइन सिस्टम है, ये जम्मू कश्मीर में कैसे सक्सेसफुल होगा? Is there any answer of this question?
Correct, Mr. Imtiaz. I think Jammu Kashmir is a classic example of how political, social situations can trump best educational intentions and efforts. And what we are witnessing, in Jammu and Kashmir, particularly given the restrictions on internet for more than a year now, almost 13 and a half months, is tragic. And in no civilized society would lock down a whole state. Collective punishment is not the hallmark of a civilized society, for the fault of few. But more importantly, Mr. Imtiaz, I'll go back to the original point. When we say technology-based interventions, we typically restrict it to internet, and that's very important in itself. But I'm saying something a lot simpler. For example, an SMS, for example, a phone call, or how we use WhatsApp, how we create using WhatsApp forums where children and teachers can discuss, share best practices, etc. And that might be helpful for you to pursue. So if that helps.
Any question from the participant? Any question?
Yes, sir, thank you. Thank you, sir. But problem is there because
I
we are
completely agree, sir.
facing we are facing so many problems while Zoom meetings, while webinars, and while others training programs, and we are imparting training programs for in grade second and grade third teachers, impact training, and we are suffering huge.
I completely
So
agree, sir. And it's what
we
is
are suffering.
honestly, I've already told you what is happening there is plain tragic. And as I said, no civilized society believes in locking down a whole state.
Teachers remain in cry. What you are saying, we can't understand. What are you are saying? So we are also remain disconnected, and all government's efforts will be in vain if the 4G network will not be in every corner of the J&K state.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Imtiaz, sir, for your participating and asking questions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you, Anurag. Over to you, Lipika, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Dr. Uttam. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time and for inviting me. I hope the session was useful and happy to take feedback. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good time. Keep best health.
Thank you, Anurag sir. Thank you, Anurag sir. Anurag sir focused the digital infrastructure challenges and advantages to impart education among the children of India, especially at Delhi. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your valuable presentation. Now I would like to invite our resource person, Dr. Shubha Sarkar. Dr. Shubha Sarkar is in the field of teaching and research in education for the last 15 years. He has got a first experience for over 7.5. Sorry, I am audible? Hello?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Again, I start from. Dr. Shubha Sarkar is in the field of teaching and research in education for the last 15 years. He has got a past experience for 7.5 years in teaching in the Institute of Advanced Studies in Education, Agartala, as an assistant professor in education. He is presently working as assistant professor, stage 3, and in charge Department of Education, Tripura University. Dr. Sarkar stood first class gold medalist in his post-graduation program of Vishwabharati Shantiniketan. Recipient of Mr. Nasir Kamila Memorial Award of Professionally Involved Educationist 2017 from Indian Psychometric and Educational Research Association. He is also a life member of All India Association for Educational Research, the Indian Science of Congress Association, Indian Association of Teacher Educators. Dr. Sarkar is also associated with DEE, Tripura University, IGNO, and ACOT Agartala, Tripura, for the last 15 years. He has completed 3 research projects. Dr. Sarkar has delivered 40 invited lectures in different institutions as a resource person. He has also published different articles and research papers in national and international journals, books and books chapter, including review and preparation of study material for different universities. Dr. Sarkar also constructed and standardized 8 tests published by IOC 9001:2008 Certified Test Publishing Company of India. Dr. Sarkar, over to you.
Thank you, madam. Thank you. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay. Namaskar and good morning to all of you. I would like to start with a prayer of Sanatana Mantra. As we are passing through a tough time, the whole world is in a danger. It's really a pandemic situation. So God, help us. Om Trambakam Jajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Bardhanam Urvarukam Eva Bandhanan mrittur mukshya mamamrita. Respected Chief Patron of this international webinar and Director of Directorate of Higher Education, Government of Tripura, Sri Saju Wahai, Honorable Guest Speaker, Dr. Jabbar Ide Lakhani ji, former Professor of BIT Rajshahi, Bangladesh, respected Principal of Rabindranath Thakur Mahavidyalaya and President of this international webinar, Dr. Chitra Pal Madam, Organizing Secretary of this international webinar and Coordinator of IQAC, Sri Uttam Mitra, esteemed resource persons, all the distinguished faculty members of Rabindranath Thakur Mahavidyalaya, technical expert, host, and most importantly, learned participants. I would like to express my sincere gratitude and thanks to the organizer for inviting me and give an opportunity to express my views on National Education Policy 2020. I heartily appreciate the organizer for organizing such a wonderful program during this pandemic situation. Friends, this policy has 4 major areas such as number 1, school education, number 2, higher education, number 3, other key areas of focus, and number 4, making it happen. Already Dr. Kashyapi Avasti Madam very nicely explained regarding school education. I will concentrate on higher education aspect of this policy. All of you know this. Our ancient Indian education was glorious in nature. We can realize through the statement, Shadeshe Pujyate Raja, Vidyan Sarvatra Pujyate. A king is honored only in his own country, but one who is learned is honored throughout the world. This was the main motto of Indian education system. As a result, we found the world first university was established in Takshashila in 700 BC. Indian scholars like Aryabhatta, Chanakya, Badshayan, Otish Dipankar Srigan, and many others made important contribution to world knowledge in such a diverse field as mathematics, astronomy, physics, philosophy, medical surgery, civil engineering, etc. The Indian education system helped in preserving ancient culture and promoting cultural unity and infused a sense of responsibility and social values. The ancient Indian education system has been a source of inspiration to all educational systems of the world. But in British period, they want only to create a class of persons, Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, opinions, and intellect. Their main ambition and motto was to create a clerk to run their government. There was no scope of innovation and creativity. During the freedom struggle, several leaders like Gokhale, Raja Ram Mohan Rai, Swami Vivekanand, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, Sister Nivedita, Pandit Madan Mohan Malakya, and Gandhiji hugely worked for better education for our people. But despite of their extreme efforts, Indian literacy rate at the time of independence was 12% only. After independence, we realized that higher education is a very important sector for the growth and development of human resource, which can take responsibility for social, economic, and scientific development of the country. The University Education Commission 1948-49 under the chairmanship of Dr. Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan gave the foundation of the future of Indian higher education. Commission emphasized especially on rural reconstruction, which we found the effect in Vishwabharati and Shantiniketan. The report of the Education Commission 1964-66 under the chairmanship of Dr. Daulat Singh Kothari symbolized the symbiotic relationship between education and national development. A lot of thoughts has since been generated towards the energizing concerns of higher education. Then come our National Education Policy 1968. After 10 years, National Education Policy 1979 and National Education Policy 1986. The implementation of previous policies on education has focused largely on issues of access and quality. After 34 years, this new education policy 2020 has come out with a new vision of the 21st century. This policy proposes the revision and revamping of all aspects of the education structure, including its regulation and governance, to create a new system that is aligned with the aspirational goal of the 21st century of education. These policies particularly emphasize on the development of the creative potential of each individual. All students are creative but differ in degrees and types. There may be a question, why should creative students identified and nurtured? Is there any necessity? Yes, the answer is creative people are the backbone of the progress of any society and development of nation. Man can be creative not only in painting, writing poetries, or discovering scientific theories, but also in cooking, carpentering, playing football, making love. Everywhere is creativity required. India will have the highest of young people in the world over the next decade. And our ability to provide high quality educational opportunities to them will determine the future of our country. More than 4.7 crore workforce may dominate the world industry and make India an economic superpower, provided that they are properly qualified. If not, they will be a burden on the nation. We talk on Japan's achievement and development, but do not follow them. Japan has no resources except human one, and she has developed it properly. Any amount of investment in capital formation will not bring desired result if human resource or knowledge industry is not developed. The world is undergoing rapid changes in the knowledge landscape. Knowledge is like fish. Unless it's fresh, it stinks. We know that a lamp can never light another lamp unless it continues to burn its own flame. So we require up-to-date, skillful knowledge. According to this policy, the aim must be for India to have an education system by 2040 that is second to none, with equitable access to the highest quality education for all learners, regardless of social or economic background. In the policy also mentioned in higher education, there are some problems. Policy mentioned these problems are less emphasis on the development of cognitive skills and learning outcomes, a rigid separation of disciplines and streaming, limited access, particularly in socio-economically disadvantaged areas, limited teacher and institutional autonomy, lesser emphasis on research. These policy envision a complete overhaul and re-energizing of the higher education system to overcome these challenges and problems, and thereby deliver high quality higher education with equity and inclusion. Some of the reforms or highlights of the policies are, according to this policy, the aim will be to be increased gross enrollment ratio in higher education from 26.3% to 50% by 2035. For this, we require more higher education institutions shall be established to ensure full access, equity, and inclusion. Policy emphasis on holistic and multidisciplinary education. There will be no hard and fast streaming. Any student from arts background can choose a science subject. So policy emphasis on holistic and multidisciplinary education would aim to develop all capacities of human being, such as intellectual, social, physical, emotional, creative, and moral in an integrated manner. Policy emphasis on multiple entry and exit. According to this policy, undergraduate degree will be either 3 or 4 year duration with multiple exit option within this period, and there will be a certification. For example, after completing 1 year in a discipline, one may receive or declared as certificate. After 2 years, if someone exit, will get diploma or a bachelor degree after completion of 3 years program. The 4-year multidisciplinary bachelor program shall be preferred option as major and minors. The 4-year program also degree with research if the students completes a rigorous research project in the major areas. Policy emphasizes on credit transfer and academic bank of credit. According to this policy, an academic bank of credit or ABC shall be established, which would digitally store the academic credits. In respect of PG course or master degree program, policy suggested 1 or 2 year program. There is a flexibility in master degree program, such as 2-year master degree for those who have completed 3-year bachelor degrees, and here second year will be devoted entirely to research. Another option is for the students who have completed a 4-year bachelor degree with research, there will be a 1-year master degree, and another option is an integrated 5-year program. Important thing is that for entering in PhD, requisite qualification will be a master degree or a 4-year bachelor degree with research. Policy emphasis on the multidisciplinary education and research university. It will be set up for the highest global standard in quality education. Policy discontinued MPhil program. Policy would like to discontinue MPhil program. Choice-based credit system will be revised and improved to allow for flexibility and will be available for students to help them attain better outcomes. Open and distance learning will be expanded, thus playing a significant role, increasing the gross enrollment ratio up to 50%. Policy emphasis on internationalization of education, which will be facilitated through both institutional collaboration and student and faculty mobility. An inter-university center for international education will be set up within selected universities. Policy emphasis on motivated, energized, and capable faculty. The most important factor for the success of higher education institution or any institution is the quality and engagement of its faculty. According to this policy, the teacher must be at the center of the fundamental reforms in the education systems. We know that without good teachers, even the best of system is bound to fail. With good teachers, even the defects of a system can largely be overcome. Policy suggested every higher education institution will have adequate faculty. A desirable student-teacher ratio will be 30:1. The prevalent approach of ad hoc contractual appointments will be immediately stopped, and appropriately designed permanent employment tenure track system for faculty will be introduced. These will be fully functional in all institutions by 2030. Faculty will be empowered to make curriculum choices for their courses and pursue research with an academic freedom. Policy, in this policy, it is mentioned that financial assistance to students shall be made available through various measures, which is very much essential during this pandemic situation. We realize these financial necessity. Efforts will be made to incentivize the merits of students belonging to SC, ST, OBC, and other socioeconomically backward students. The National Scholarship Portal will be expanded. This policy emphasis on student activity and participation, as students are the prime stakeholders in the education system. For these reasons, a vibrant campus life is highly essential for high quality education or teaching learning process. According to this policy, students will be given plenty of opportunities for participation in sports, arts club, eco clubs, activity clubs, community service project, etc. In every educational institution, we know that there shall be counseling system for handling stress and emotional adjustment. A systematized agreement shall be created to provide the requisite support for students from rural background, including increasing hostel facilities as needed. More importantly, all higher education institutions will ensure quality medical facilities for all students in their institution. Children not only learn, but more importantly, learn how to learn. Education thus must move towards less content and more towards learning about how to think critically and solve problems, how to be creative and multidisciplinary, and how to innovate, adopt, and absorb new material in novel and changing fields. Pedagogy must evolve to make education more experiential, holistic, integrated, inquiry-driven, discovery-oriented, learner-centered, discussion-based, flexible, and obviously enjoyable. Education must build character, enable learners to be ethical, rational, compassionate, and caring, while at the same time prepare them for gainful learning employment. Policy in this regard, it is very vital that teacher education, creating a pool of school teachers that will shape the next generation. But in respect to the quality of teacher education institution, Justice J.S. Verma Commission in 2012 mentioned that a majority of standalone teacher education institutions are not even attempting serious teacher education. In order to improve and reach the level of integrity and credibility regarding restore the prestige of the teaching profession by 2030, only educationally sound, multidisciplinary and integrated teacher education program shall be enforced. In this regard, policy suggested the 4-year integrated B.Ed offered by such multidisciplinary higher education institution by 2030 become the minimal degree qualification for school teachers. The higher education institutions offering the 4-year integrated B.Ed may also run a 2-year B.Ed for the students who have already received a bachelor degree in a specialized subject. A 1-year B.Ed may also be offered for candidates who have received a 4-year undergraduate degree in a specialized subject. Policy suggested that in order to maintain uniform standard for teacher education, the administration or admission to pre-service teacher education program shall be through a suitable subject and teaching aptitude test, and it will be conducted by the National Testing Agency. In service, continuous professional development for college and university teacher will continue through the existing institutional arrangement and ongoing initiatives. Policy emphasis on the use of technology platforms such as Swayam, Diksha, and PTL for online training of teachers, so that standardized training programs can be administered to a large number of teachers within a short span of time. Regarding the function of regulatory system and higher education, policy suggested that there will be 4 structure, such as 4 structure will be set up as 4 independent verticals within one umbrella institution, and that will be Higher Education Commission of India. The first vertical of Higher Education Commission of India will be the National Higher Education Regulatory Council. It will function as the common single point regulator for higher education sector, including teacher education and excluding medical and legal education. It will look important matters, particularly good governance, financial aspect, audits, infrastructure, and educational outcomes. The second vertical of Higher Education Commission of India will be the National Accreditation Council or NAC. The third vertical of Higher Education Council will be Higher Education Grants Council or HEGC. It will function for funding and financing of higher education. The fourth vertical of Higher Education Commission of India will be General Education Council. It will function as for academic standard setting, credit transfer, equivalence, etc. A national higher education qualification framework will be formulated by the GEC and it shall be synced with the national skill qualification framework to ease the integration of vocational education into higher education. The professional councils such as Indian Council for Agriculture Research, Veterinary Council of India, National Council of Teacher Education, etc. will act as professional standard setting bodies, PSSBs. They will be invited to be a member of GEC. The national policy emphasis on the research. For that reason, the National Research Foundation or NRF will be set up through an act of parliament as an autonomous body of the government of India. We all are very well acquainted that research is very important aspect in higher education. But despite this importance of research, the research and innovation investment in India is only 0.69% of GDP, whereas in USA it is 2.8%, in Israel 4.3%, and 4.2% in South Korea. The prime activities of NRF or National Research Foundation will be: number one, funding research in all disciplines across the academic landscape through a competitive peer review process. Number two, it will be building research capacity at academic institutions across the country. Number three, creating beneficial linkages between researchers, government, and industry. Number four, recognizing outstanding research and prizes and seminars. We know that in higher education, research is essential and a very important aspect. In this regard, I would like to quote D. Purandeshwari at the 28th convocation of Kuvempu University. She said, "It is only when our university will be able to produce a generation of innovators, not initiators, planners, not paper pushers, job creators, not job seekers, and original thinkers, and not routine followers. Treading the beaten path, only then our university graduate can confidently echo the statement of great French philosopher Descartes, cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. And in this way, India will be a vibrant, dynamic, and living society. As has been well said, I in India should stand for innovation and not imitation only. Then only we can create our main motto, Atmanirbhar Bharat. Any policy's effectiveness depends on its implementation. Such implementation will require multiple initiatives and actions. We know this, which will have to be taken by multiple bodies in a synchronized and systematic manner, and most importantly, with a positive attitude from inner self. In this regard, I would like to quote one quote. You know this: if an egg is broken by an outside force, a life ends. If an egg breaks from within, life begins. Great things always begin from within. I would like to conclude with Swami Vivekananda's one important quote, and that is, have faith in yourself. All power is in you. Be conscious and bring it out. Thank you. Jai Hind. Over to you, madam.
Thank you, Subhash sir. Thank you for your valuable and informative presentation. Sir elaborately discussed the NEP 2020 and nicely focused the revolutionary aspect of our NEP 2020. Again, thank you, sir. Any question from the participant?
Thank you. Any question?
Any question? Any question? Any question? So I conclude here. So thank you, Subhash sir, and again thank you, Subhash sir, and over to Uttam sir.
Thank you.
Over to Uttam sir. Uttam sir.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. So now I would like to request the Secretary of our Teachers Council, Srimati Shankari Das Dev, Associate Professor in Human Physiology, to extend vote of thanks to all our resource persons and participants.
A very good afternoon. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
A very good afternoon to all. As we proceed towards the end of this international webinar entitled NEP 2020 Prospects and Preparations, it's my privilege to propose vote of thanks on behalf of this esteemed institution. Firstly, I want to express my sincere gratitude to our patron, Sir Shaju Wahid A, IS Honorable Director of Higher Education, Government of Tripura, who has spared his precious time for us and graced this event. Thank you very much, sir. Now, I want to extend my sincere thanks to our guest speaker, Dr. Jabbar Idel Khani, sir, former professor, Bangladesh Institute of Technology, Rajshahi, for expressing his views on moral education and we. Thank you, sir, for joining with us and for your motivational words. I would like to express my sincere thanks to Dr. Kashyopi Abosti, Madam, Assistant Professor, NIEPA, for giving an excellent outline on the topic reforms in school education mentioned in the new Education Policy 2020. Thank you, ma'am, for enlightening all of us. Further, I would like to thank Sri Anurag Kundu, Chairman DCPCR, Delhi, for enlightening us on the topic online education and technology use. And I think in this pandemic situation, ICT is playing a vital role in our education system also. Thank you, sir, for such a nice presentation. I would like to thank Dr. Subhash Sarkar, Assistant Professor, Tripura University, for giving a wonderful presentation on reforms in higher education mentioned in this NEP 2020. Thank you once again, sir. I would like to express my gratitude and sincere thanks to the president of this event, Dr. Chitra Pal, principal in charge of RTM Vishalgarh, for his warm welcome address and for providing us an encouragement to organize such an event. We are very much grateful to you, to our principal madam. My deep sense of appreciation to the organizing secretary, Sri Uttam Mitra, coordinator IQAC RTM, for all his efforts for this successful webinar. I also like to thank our beloved student Shubham Shaha for his technical support. Thank you, Shubham. Last but not the least, I would like to thank to all the learned colleagues and all the learned participants from different schools of Tripura and all other learned participants and my beloved students who registered themselves for this webinar. And here I want to mention that about 209 participants have registered for this webinar. Besides our state, participants are from Jammu and Kashmir, Maharashtra, Manipur, Mizoram, Uttar Pradesh, and Bihar. I hope you all will join with us again in our upcoming webinars also. Thank you all again.
Thank you very much, madam. Just an announcement to all the participants. You will be shared a link for feedback, giving feedback tonight. And those who are willing to receive e-certificate, filling up the feedback form is mandatory for them. And within a week, we shall be sharing our certificate of participation in your email. And thank you once again for joining. And I was really amazed to see participants from different states. Thank you very much. And also one more announcement. Tomorrow also we have another webinar on national education policy. And this will be, I think, the 8th one. So tomorrow from Rithi ma'am, would you like to make an announcement for tomorrow's webinar? Rithi ma'am, are you there?
Hello, sir.
Okay. Okay. So tomorrow, what time, madam? Principal ma'am, what time the webinar starts tomorrow?
From 11:30 to 2 p.m.
Okay. Okay, those who are willing, they can join. They are most welcome to join. Yes. Thank you
Hello,
very
excuse
much.
me.
Yes, yes.
Excuse me, उत्तम sir,
Yes.
ये link कहाँ भेजेंगे आप?
We shall be sharing on our WhatsApp groups as well as in your email also, sir.
Sir, share in chat box. Share it is in chat box.
Sorry, sir. Have you registered? If you have registered, we can share only to our registered participants. Otherwise, you can register also. Or you can on chat box, you give your email ID so that we can record it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for joining. Thank you, Subhash sir, Jabbar sir, and Kashopi ma'am. It was a joy to see all of you together.
Thank you. Nice to see you. Thank you.
Just before we leave, if you all turn on your camera, we can have one group photograph. If you don't mind, please, I request all the participants turn on your camera so that you can have one beautiful group photograph. And I hope I have some colleagues from orientation course in Mizoram also. It is really such a joy to see all of you here. Okay, thank you very much. We will end our session here with the permission of our event president. Goodbye.
Uttam sir, leave করছি।